Without further ado, I'm going to bring in my guest for today. She is in London covering the Assange case pretty much around the clock. She is a journalist with Activism Munich. Please welcome to the show, Taylor Hudak. Taylor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so excited to talk to you, and I know you have a lot of information to share. So let's just start at the beginning. I've been following your Twitter account as well as, some of the other Assange activists who are on the ground in DC and also on the ground in London and also media outlets all around the world. And some of the stuff I've heard about the trial so far, I know, I believe a mutual colleague of ours, Gordon Dimmick, I heard him, he tweeted something that I thought was very clever, but also sadly, tragically, very true. He said, look, calling this a kangaroo court is an insult to kangaroos. So let's just start at the beginning. What's going on so far?
Yes, so we've resumed the second half of Julian Assange's substantive extradition hearings. The first day was on Monday, and I could say that on the first day, outside the courthouse in London, there was a very large crowd of protesters calling for Assange to be freed and for no U.S. extradition. There were also several high-profile speakers, including Rebecca Vincent, John Pilger, John Shipton, who is Assange's father, as well as Kristen Hrafnsson, and people were making a lot of noise. There still has been protesters outside the courthouse, but of course on that first day, it was a pretty big deal, and the major media outlets were present, as we expected to be present on the first day, but maybe not throughout the rest of the court proceedings. But on the first day of court, we were hit with some surprises. So to begin with, Assange was rearrested under the new superseding indictment, which was issued in June of 2020. That indictment has officially superseded the previous indictment, and therefore the previous extradition request is void, and he is now being tried under a new extradition request or a replacement request. So there's some changes there. Now, this new superseding indictment didn't bring any additional charges, but it did broaden the scope of the already existing charge, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. It includes alleged activity that took place between around 2010 and 2011. And the timing of all of this is interesting, considering that the United States had until around May or June of 2019 to issue an indictment and their charges. And so this new indictment and the new evidence in that indictment comes over a year late. And the United States' excuse for this was the fact that it was the result of an ongoing investigation. However, this information was publicly available a decade ago. So it's very bizarre. After Assange
so wait, let me jump in for a second here to kind of let's give people a quick refresher here on what you're referring to with the charges in 2010 and 2011. What they're really going for, and this is just a nuts and bolts explanation. I know there's more to it than this, and feel free to weigh in. They want to say that Julian Assange helped Chelsea Manning hack information. Basically, they want to say that, yeah, he helped her, because publishing information is not a crime at all. But if they can make the claim that he helped her hack stuff, they can say that that's a crime. So they are desperately trying to pin this on him, even though she has repeatedly said, no, he didn't help me. WikiLeaks never divulged sources. They never help. They just publish what they're given. They pretty much tortured her. Well, they did torture her. There's no pretty much necessary there. They tortured her to try to get her to confess this. She still hasn't, likely because it ain't true. And that those are these charges they're basically trying to force upon him, more or less. Is that?
Yes, they are absolutely trying to secure the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge, which really conspiracy to hack a government computer. The U.S. government is trying to secure this charge because it does separate Assange's activities from that of a journalist and, again, alleged activities. So what was added into that charge specifically with this new indictment is they're now claiming that Assange also conspired with anonymous hackers, and that he was working with the collective Anonymous, and that he helped an individual hack into an Icelandic bank company, And just the fact that Assange would encourage people to leak to WikiLeaks is now being criminalized, as well as WikiLeaks staff member Sarah Harrison's aiding Edward Snowden in seeking refuge in Russia. All of that has been added to the hacking charge. And so it kind of doesn't make too much sense, considering this was information, again, that was, some of the information was publicly available for a decade. And they claim it's the result of an ongoing investigation, but that is what they're attempting to do. And also it can be argued that this is another attempt to smear his character by trying to frame him as a hacker and not a journalist. But I've said before, for someone who's hypothetically not a journalist, Assange has won many journalism awards. So that argument is just nonsense. He is a journalist and WikiLeaks is a publishing company.
So can you speak a little bit to what's going on the inside as well? I mean, I have heard some things. He has been denied access to his family. He did not get access to his attorneys in a reasonable amount of time. They have complained about this too. Can you elaborate on all that? And then I heard something. How is he being contained in the courtroom exactly? Because I've heard some things about that as well. Like, can you speak to all that?
Yes, similar to the previous hearing, he is being held in the back of the court away from his, which makes it difficult for him to be able to communicate with them confidentially. So the way the court is set up seems inherently unfair. However, in the UK, that is something that can happen in criminal cases. And he, of course, is still in Belmarsh prison at this time. And while he was there for the past several months, he hasn't been able to see his family because they weren't allowing visitation. And even if his family were to visit him and actually be in physical contact with him, he would have to quarantine for 14 days in the prison. So it's really tormenting on him mentally, not only this hearing and everything that's taking place with his legal issues, but the fact that he's being kept away from his family. And his father is here, and I actually spoke with him earlier, and some WikiLeaks supporters and people who are close to the organization have been here outside the courts. The court hasn't really been allowing people in the public to be physically present in the courtroom because of COVID restrictions, but it seems that that's kind of being used as a stretch to really limit press access and public access to these. Very clear that the United States government and the prosecution do not want this case being discussed in the public.
So, first of all, we're dealing with we got a little bit of a lag going, but we're just going to plow through it. I know you're in the hotel room, and I appreciate everyone's understanding and patience. Everyone who's watching and listening. What was it like talking to his dad? Like, kind of speak to the emotion of it. Like, what was it like for you? What was it like? What was your gauge on the whole experience?
Yes, I just wanted to get his dad's perspective on what was taking place. I think it's also a way to humanize Assange. Many people see him as either this godlike figure that's not human because he's done such great work, and sometimes that can desensitize people from what's happening to him, or of course others don't particularly like him, but that helps humanize him. And I just wanted to see his perspective on what has happened so far in the case.
So why do you think, well, first of all, what if you notice, I mean, you said that a lot of the press outlets around the world, were there. Do you think that around the world, is there more of a, kind of more of an understanding of this issue and more of a sensitivity to this issue than in the United States? Have you found that to be the case where people are a little more, because, in the United States, the propaganda is so thick that I think so many people, especially, if your only go-tos are cable news, are just unaware of the gross assault on press freedom that this is. Do you think that the world has a greater understanding of what's going on here?
Perhaps they do. Perhaps. I will say, though, that back in the groups like Action for Assange who are protesting now in DC, so there is support for Assange. And there is, of course, elsewhere in the world. I'm not sure if there's less in the United States than elsewhere in the world, but I do know that within the past year or 2 years, as the persecution against Julian Assange continued to intensify, more and more people started to speak up and speak out in support of him and in support of a free press. So I can say that there's more support for him than there was maybe a few years ago as the persecution against him continued. We've seen professional organizations like RSF, Reporters Without Borders, PEN Norway, Amnesty International all call for the U.S. to drop these charges. So it's a positive thing.
So what has transpired in the courtroom within the past, because it's day 3 now, correct? And I know it's already evening where you're at. I struggle with my time zones, I really do, but I know it's already evening where you're at. So are we at the end of day 3 now, or is it day 4 already? Or
yes, you're correct. Today is the end of day 3, and I'll just kind of go through the main points of what happened so far. So like I said earlier, on day 1, Assange was rearrested. And I did bring up the point of press access, but I also want to make note that you have to go through a process to get access to this case and to be able to cover it through a video link. Now, NGO observers and other professional organizations who were seeking to monitor the court proceedings were first granted access. And then once they clicked on the video link, they were denied access. And the judge said that 40 NGO representatives and professional organizations or members of these organizations were granted court access on accident. So she actually pulled their access and revoked it. This was on Monday morning this happened. So that was a big surprise and big disappointment to many people who were looking to monitor what was happening. So the first
why do you think that occurred?
I think it could be because they are short-staffed, honestly, at this time because of the pandemic. I also think, like I said earlier, I'm not sure that this is a case that they really want to be discussed in the public, and press access has been not a priority, and it's been really difficult to get access to this case. So it could be a mixture of both of those things.
Okay.
So the new indictment that was addressed in court, and the defense actually requested that the new material presented in indictment that it be dismissed in court and not used because it was brought to the court's attention too late. It was incorporated into the UK jurisdiction right before this hearing was to take place, and therefore did not prevent time for the defense to properly prepare. The judge did deny this request, and so the defense then filed a new request to postpone the hearings until January 2021, saying that they did not have time, of course, to prepare. The judge denied that request as well. She cited her reasoning for doing so was because they had until August 21st to file a request to postpone the hearings, and they did not do that. So they had to go ahead with the hearings. And I mean, it's pretty consistent because the judge has been consistently ruling in favor of the prosecution and not the defense. So I was not too surprised there. But that pretty much wraps up what took place on the first day. And there was also several witnesses for the defense that spoke the next few days.
Can you speak to the details of any of the witnesses?
Yeah. So on the second day, there was a witness, Clive Stafford Smith, who is an attorney, and he specializes in human rights. And again, this is a witness for the defense in favor of Assange. And he really spoke about how WikiLeaks publications helped initiate positive social and political change, which was so cool to hear this in the courts, talking about how WikiLeaks publications were used in other cases. So for example, this particular attorney, the witness, Stafford Smith, he represents several Guantanamo Bay prisoners, and he said that he would use WikiLeaks publications, specifically those surrounding Guantanamo Bay and the torture program there, in his own cases to help his clients. And in fact, the drone killings in Pakistan perpetrated by the US, WikiLeaks publications helped in changing people's attitudes on drones, and also helped to really establish anti-drone legislation in Pakistan. So essentially, WikiLeaks publications were used as evidence in those court cases. And so it was very impactful. And it was also stated that the prosecutor, again, the individual who was representing the US government, James Lewis, was not happy that things such as US war crimes and torture programs were being discussed in court. Interestingly enough, the indictment does not include the collateral murder video or that publication itself. And it's perhaps because they do not want this to be discussed in court.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and